Thank you, Pamela, for the introduction. And so she mentioned I was initially going to talk about our practice of Zazen. Initially, when I speak with a group that I don't know before, I try to take a topic that we, for sure, sort of is has, you know, some relevance for all of us. However, coming back home last night and hearing about the passing of Thich Nhat Hanh, I felt quite moved, and it was clear immediately as I read that message that this was what I needed to talk about today. So it's impossible to try to capture, you know, in a talk like this within the limited timeline, just any of his achievements and contribution to Buddhism in the 21st century and in the West, its development. So my talk will focus on just some of the ways in which his teachings have touched my life and influenced my practice, perhaps processing some of my gratitude and sadness and as I do so, and also to say it, as my initial topic was around the practice of Zazen as an embodied practice, the topic of embodiment is still very much in there because it was in Thai's teachings. Just wanted to share a little bit of my own path and how the influence of Thich Nhat Hanh. During the summer, when I turned 25, my interest in Buddhism grew enough that I started to read about it. And that led me to try meditation. And though I found it promising, it was also incredibly hard for me and too challenging to really persist with on my own. I went back to college for my last semester there at the end of the summer, and back there I found myself experiencing unprecedented levels of fear and anxiety that I hadn't encountered before in my life. A lot of what was going on, I think I realized I was 25. I'd taken 3 years off between high school and college to be a little clearer on my life and aspects, and then now I was about to graduate college, but I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And it seemed like my life was requiring answers of me and requiring plans as well that I neither felt that I had, nor that I felt that I had any actual capacity to conjure up. And one of those was plans I was incapable of coming up with was that I had to present a topic for a thesis for my BA in human ecology that I was finishing in Sweden, where I grew up. It's quite common to write a thesis for your undergraduate degree, which is what I was requested to do. So I found myself just with this fear and anxiety and only unable to regulate it in any way. I did, however, join a meditation group. Rather fortuitous, met a few other students who were interested in meditation, and only one of us had any experience. He would kind of hold the space and lead us in guided meditations, and he was the one who suggested the readings of Thich Nhat Hanh to me. And I just can't overestimate the impact that those readings had on me at that time. I remember reading The Miracle of Mindfulness and Present Moment, Wonderful Moment in particular, and finding that reading Thich Nhat Hanh's words were just like breathing this breath of fresh air that I'd been incapable of drawing myself. All of a sudden I could access. There's just the simplicity of his writing was astonishing to me. They didn't require me to try to grasp the teachings intellectually. They just flowed like poetry and soothed me, and helped me establish a meditation practice on my own, which further helped me deal with my anxiety. And I found that I had up until then been such a young skeptic and a bit of a nihilist, always finding reasons to not engage or fully commit with anything. And there's something in engaging with Thai's teachings and trying to employ his meditation instructions and gathas, these little short verses for specific activities during the day. There was a clear sense in my practice early on there that this is it. Actually, I need to go for this. I need to really not hold back as I always do in my life. That this is something that's meaningful and that I really want to do. I didn't know what that looked like, but it was a clear sense that I want to give myself to this. These teachings and this practice. And also went gratuitous and as a further illustration of how Thai's readings helped bring me out of the hole that I'd found myself in. So out of my engagement with them grew the topic for my undergrad thesis, actually, which ended up being about socially engaged Buddhism and the environment. Turned out my life didn't fall apart as I imagined at most fearful times, and I found some newfound ease, and out of that place, still kept this call to Buddhist practice was clear, and so eventually landed me at San Francisco Zen Center as a farm and garden apprentice in their program there. And then 3 years after having lived at San Francisco Zen Center for 3 years, I had the opportunities. I was back in Europe to be able to participate in the 3-week retreat at Plum Village. And I was so excited by the prospect of hearing Thich Nhat Hanh teach in person. And with that in mind, I must admit that initially I was slightly underwhelmed by his presence. I had, and imagine some others might have had the opportunity to see the Dalai Lama teach at some point, unfortunate like me. And he's got this, for me, this kind of electric, charisma that just radiates. And in comparison to that, this little Vietnamese monk didn't look so special at first. Actually, he looks pretty subdued and like an ordinary monk. However, observing his presence over the course of 3 weeks, though, I just deepened my appreciation of the way he was, of his embodied presence, really, how he was carrying himself and totally living the teachings that he was teaching himself. There was not a gap between what he was saying and how he was acting. It was all one there, totally aligned, totally beautiful. And this is from a man who, had been through the trauma of seeing his brothers and sisters being killed in Vietnam, been shut out of his own country for speaking out against the war that was killing them. And yet he embodied such unshakable belief in the Buddhist path of liberation, and as well as how it could be accessed by any of us, really, at any moment. I wanted to touch on a couple of particularly profound teachings of Thai, as his students know him, that I experienced and felt nourished by during that retreat. And one was this thing where, like, during the talks that he would give, it was in a packed big hall, and we were hundreds of people in there. And he would be standing up, using a whiteboard and putting down the key concepts as he was teaching. And then when the whiteboard started to become filled, he would turn around and just erase what he had written on there. And you can see that when, just as he was erasing this whiteboard, it was the most beautiful thing. There was nothing else going on in this person's mind than just erasing the text that was on there. This was not a means to try to clear the board so he could keep teaching. This in itself was the total activity of the moment. Yeah, and this, like, that as minuscule an act of erasing what had been written, this was an opportunity to practice. This was a way in which he was teaching, not an action needed to get done to get somewhere else again. Yeah, and through the performance of this simple act, the whole room seemed like the whole room would just sort of settle another notch. It's like we all could take a breath of fresh air there, to just all just come back into our bodies and the room, and be aware of where we were, and how fortuitous we were to be spending some time with this living Buddha. It was like as if we collectively for a moment enter the state of whiteboard samadhi. This was all there was this whiteboard, nothing else going on. And that this little man could perform this, this seemingly mundane act in such a way, seemingly impacting the whole room of people. It was a miracle, actually. That's the word I would use, and I think it's the word that Thich Nhat Hanh did use also. I looked up one of the famous quotes from The Miracle of Mindfulness, very much on this topic, where he says, "People usually consider walking on water or in thin air as a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk on either water or on thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day we're engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes, all is a miracle." So, yes, and can we see it? Yes. How do we get in touch with the miracle? It's right there, and yet. Another teaching that during the retreat that had a big impact on me was, again, he was teaching and using the whiteboard, and he was teaching he was very much in his teaching stayed with sort of the basic Buddhist teachings, didn't venture too far out into complicated philosophy and so forth. He would sort of teach the core Buddhist teachings common to all Buddhist traditions, and in a non-sectarian way as well. It's hard to disagree with many of these teachings, I think. But so he was teaching the Four Noble Truths, and as he was framing the first noble truth, we usually would translate it as suffering. He's using the language of ill-being. He'd spoken a little bit about introducing it, and then saying, Supposed to we ask our politicians to tend to the first noble truth of ill-being, what would we like them to focus on? And for the next several minutes, people were calling out poverty. He would write it mindfully on the whiteboard. Income inequality, environmental destruction, racial injustice. So this went on for several minutes. He was slow, intentional, deliberate in his actions. And then he turned around and said, as spiritual people, we need to go deeper. We need to pay attention to the tension we each hold in our own body and mind. This is the most important thing. We need to be aware of how we can make ethical choices in each moment. And that's why we need to begin to address ill-being as it manifests in our body and mind. If we don't, we just deal with the symptoms of ill-being, not with the causes. Yeah, this had this kind of hit me that this was not just anybody that was saying this, but Thich Nhat Hanh, the teacher who coined the term engaged Buddhism, who has written love letters to the earth and spoken out about innumerable injustices in the world. Just as one example, I wanted to get this into this talk as well, because it's just one of many examples, but I remember reading it and being impacted by it. In 2008, Thich Nhat Hanh wrote to the CEO of Kentucky Fried Chicken, encouraging him to do his best to implement more humane practices for raising and slaughtering chickens. And he did so in the most loving voice. After raising the concerns that were reported about the cruelty of the practices connected to the chickens that Kentucky Fried Chicken were serving and selling, and also emphasizing the pressures that business leaders face in the push for profits. Taking that into consideration too, he stated that, he said it this way: I'm also certain that you have a heart of compassion. If these reports are true, please stop and reconsider. No feeling creature should be treated so cruelly. Treating chickens with brutality not only hurts every one of those birds, it's hurt every one of us, including you yourself, and even your loved ones. If you look deeply, I'm sure you will see this clearly, and you will be determined to find another way. I believe you know already in your heart that our success in life cannot be measured in dollars and cents alone. So there's such love and care and appealing to the humanity of the CEO, to his heart of compassion, and the knowledge that embedded deep within his heart is this knowledge that success in life cannot be measured in dollars and cents alone. So, and also, he's here in this Thay's teachings of interbeing, how the liberation of one of us will affect the liberation of all, and conversely, how the suffering of one is intimately bound up with the suffering of all. So I just feel like this way of speaking with such kindness and love, and yet there's a push there. That moral voice is strong and can't be denied or neglected, right? So and this letter was written in 2008, which was the year before my retreat at Plum Village, and I had read it at that time, and found it. So just as one example of the many ways in which he engaged and cared for the sufferings of the world, and the need to engage and to manifest in a living example of ways of doing that. So as I was sitting in our retreat and hearing that as spiritual people, while we need to address the sufferings of the world, our work doesn't actually stop there, and suggesting well, neither should it maybe stop there for our politicians and leaders in society either. What he was emphasizing was that the most important work that we have to do is to pay attention to the tension we each hold in our own body and mind. This is the most important thing, and then this connection to ethics there is significant, that this is the most important thing because this is necessary in order to be aware of the ethical choices we have to make in each moment. So I find that, and I've said this already, but the beauty of these teachings and practices is that they are so simple. And we've got the story of coming from the Japanese Zen tradition of Bird Nest Roshi, who was sought out by a student, and in response to the burning question that the student had come with, gave the answer, avoid evil, do good, and save all beings. And the student was a little underwhelmed and said, like, even a child of 3 could say that. Yes, that's true. Even a child of 3 could say that, but even a person of 80 will struggle to practice it. So I feel like these are Thich Nhat Hanh is that Bird Nest Roshi, just these simple teachings that we don't need to be smart, to understand them, but how do we embody them? How do we practice them? What might prevent us from doing so? And what was so remarkable about him is just much of it is his capacity to keep living the way he was teaching, and for decades and decades, just unwavering faith and in the practice, and as he was teaching it, a miracle of mindfulness, and to, as in the case of this whiteboard samadhi, to treat even the smallest little act not as a means to an end, but as a gateway to liberation, just right there. So what might be the elements that sustained his practice, and how can we keep his practice alive within our own practice? I just try to name some, overlapping elements in there that I see, that I'm feeling inspired to renew within my practice too. There's really like an unwavering faith that this is the path. This is the way to practice. This is awakening is available right here and right now. During my retreat, I did purchase one of his calligraphy, piece of his calligraphy at the end, and it says, mindfulness is a source of happiness. that sort of seemed to capture what I felt like he was teaching and what I would like to remember. So there's clearly an unwavering faith of his, and it comes with this discipline of just employing that, engaging that faith that's required to engage that faith in even the smallest little activities. And when I say discipline, it's in his case, there's a discipline that's coupled with this radical kindness and gentleness. It's not it's a carrot, not a stick. And overlapping with these, just like this sincerity, this total sincerity about the practice. And we live in a culture where there's that we maybe don't value sincerity so much. There's a lot of emphasis on being authentic, like expressing my own authentic self, and sincerity might be sort of a little looked down upon in our dominant culture. And I think we don't appreciate that element perhaps enough as much as we should in our spiritual practice as well. So how do we how can we stay sincere if we have some faith that these practices are are helpful, as I found self transformed by them when I initially encountered them. Like I've lost touch with a little bit of that freshness over years of practice that I want to renew. I vow to sort of return to that and open up to real possibility of just stopping, taking a few conscious breaths, just to not sort of be peripherally aware, have some body and breath awareness as I go through my day, but to sort of just give my full attention here and there, and to mundane tasks, and just to be open to that, to really feel into what that's like, to be fully present right there. So I wanted to end with a poem I was sent as I woke up this morning, and I thought I had no presentation of it, so I assumed this was his death poem. And Zen, there's a common practice of writing a death poem when you're passing away, and in some cases, teachers or practitioners sort of work on their death poems, particularly for decades, and sort of tweaking words and so forth. So I thought this might be it, but it's actually, so I looked it up. It's a poem of his from 1993 called Oneness. So it does seem like he's very much speaking about his own death, but and he might well have been. So I'll read it for you. The moment I die, I will try to come back to you as quickly as possible. I promise it will not take long. Isn't it true? I am already with you in every moment. Just look, feel my presence. If you want to cry, please cry. And know that I will cry with you. The tears you shed will heal us both. Your tears are mine. The earth I tread this morning transcends history. Spring and winter are both present in the moment. The young leaf and the dead leaf are really one. My feet touch deathlessness, and my feet are yours. Walk with me now. Let us enter the dimension of oneness and see the cherry tree blossom in winter. Why should we talk about death? I don't need to die to be back with you. So let me read it once more, actually. Then I'll stop. The moment I die, I will try to come back to you as quickly as possible. I promise it will not take long. Isn't it true? I am already with you in every moment. Just look, feel my presence. If you want to cry, please cry, and know that I will cry with you. The tears you shed will heal us both. Your tears are mine. The earth I tread this morning transcends history. Spring and winter are both present in the moment. The young leaf and the dead leaf are really one. My feet touch deathlessness, and my feet are yours. Walk with me now. Let us enter the dimension of oneness and see the cherry tree blossom in winter. Why should we talk about death? I don't need to die to be back with you. Thank you very much.